Hello, and welcome to the Brave New Weed podcast. And now, here is your host, Joe Dolce.
Greetings. This is our birth into the wide world of podcasting. Our goal here is to entertain you, educate you, provoke you, and stimulate you so that you can be the most informed cannabists in the world. So I'm here with Matthew Hendershot, my co-host.
How you doing,
Matthew?
Joe?
I'm good, thank you. I'm a little nervous.
A little nervous. I'm absolutely giddy. I've been looking forward to this moment since the day we met.
Well, you're the happier one.
Prior to that.
You're the happier one amongst us. But let me tell you guys why we're here. 4 years ago, I started writing this book on this new world of weed. And what happened is the subject just gripped my mind, and it hasn't let go. It turned out that cannabis was one of the most fascinating subjects. It intersects with everything: politics, art, law, health, race, criminal justice. It goes on. And it's so much more than a plant, even though it is one of the most amazing plants out there.
No argument here.
No, it's amazing. So I want to invite all of you listeners to come along for the ride. We're going to be talking to the brightest minds, the most outrageous, and the most courageous spirits in the modern cannabis movement.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
They have a lot to say.
Absolutely. Why don't we jump right into it? Let's get into some news.
Let's do it.
So first up on our items for news is obviously big news to us in that we're launching here on 420, the American holiday for marijuana.
That's right. These are the high holidays of the season. 4/19 is Bicycle Day, which commemorates the first time Alfred Hoffman first dropped acid. Took a bicycle ride that day. 4/20 is Cannabis Day, and 4/21 is Earth Day.
Oh, yes, Earth Day. Wonderful.
We really need Earth Day.
Yeah. So how did the 420... I was always told that 420 was the police code for marijuana smoking in progress. How did 420...
Not what I understand. I mean, it's still up for a lot of debate. It seems that there was a bunch of kids in San Rafael, California, who used to gather outside behind the school at 4:20 to smoke a joint.
What is that? It's like 20 minutes after detention after 3 o'clock.
I don't know. I think so. And somehow that got ensconced into myth, and that's why we're here today.
Excellent. Well, we're not the only big thing launching this week. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff going on in the world of cannabis, but one of the more important to us related things is this week also announced the launch of the campaign to fund the Whole Weed Catalog. You're much more better informed. Why don't you explain a little bit? What is the Whole Weed Catalog?
Well, this is shameless self-promotion here.
Shame away.
The Whole Weed Catalog is based on the Whole Earth Catalog, which launched in the 1970s and 80s. And it really became the emblem of the environmental movement. It was a book of tools, really, and ideas to help people live sustainably on Earth. And every cool family in the country had a copy of this massive catalog that kept republishing year after year. So I really felt that there was time, that there was a place with really good, verifiable, new information about cannabis and how to use cannabis to optime your life.
So like a weed encyclopedia.
You could say that.
Only more approachable, more fun.
More fun. It's tools, product, and information. So
Sure.
I think it's a little more user-friendly than an encyclopedia. But it's got ideas. It's got tons of new products. It's got all sorts of things that people who love cannabis are going to want to know and be attached to.
Well, and I've seen some of the layouts and the pages, and it really seems like something that you could sit back and enjoy a nice puff, and then just like flip to a random page and spend 30 minutes learning something new.
For many, many, many sessions, I would hope. Okay, it's going to be a big volume, full, packed with information. There'll be a website that updates regularly, but consistently. And you can look about it, you can see more about it and learn about it at www.unbound.com. And then you can search for Whole Weed Catalog within Unbound Books. We are crowdfunding this book.
As you do in this day and age.
Well, I want to know that the people who are backing us really love it and are going to be dedicated to exploring it and helping us really getting it into the hands of people who want to read it.
Yeah, you're working directly with the publishers to get this put together.
I am.
I'm a backer of the book. I think that it's great. Glad to be a part of it as well. And it opens with what is referred to as the Cannifesto. So I was wondering if we could share with our audience a little bit of this Cannifesto.
Take it away, Matthew.
Sure. So to quote from the book, If a substance that grows in the ground can make you laugh, see things from a new perspective, open an insight, or make music sound deeper, or food taste richer, or help you heal, or feel better, or get to sleep, or stop twitching, or getting anxious and irritable, if it can help you focus more on your kids, or your work, or your art, then maybe we should know how to use it optimally and with impunity. Along with this massive knowledge comes confusion. The 90-year U.S. prohibition, fueled by corporate greed, government lies, and pseudoscience masquerading as fact, has been remarkably effective. Whole weed is one attempt to end the confusion about the herbs we grow, cure, inhale, the meds we take, and the tools we use to do so. That sounds like a great collection of information that, as an experienced cannabis user, I like to think I got my stuff figured out. But it seems like if someone were to present that to me, I would dive in and try and get as much out of it as I possibly could.
I think right now the world of cannabis is happening faster than any of us can really clock and keep on top of.
Oh, no joke there.
So the idea is to sort of accumulate the best, the newest, the most research-based information and put it out, and then keep updating it and keep getting other contributors to get on board.
So it is going to publish through Unbound. You can fund it through the Unbound website at unbound.com. And what are some of the things that you guys are putting together as tiers to support the early backers?
There's all sorts of different levels of backing. You know, if, at the lowest level, you get a signed first edition copy ahead of time, ahead of schedule.
Signed by you.
Signed by me.
Excellent.
As the producer of the book. There are incredible grooming and beauty products that are made with CBD and hemp oil that I've been using from a company called Apothecana that I really want people to explore. So they're going to be one of the levels. There's everything from a Connoisseur series dinner in San Francisco that you'll get tickets to, which is an amazing event. Amazing.
Connoisseur.
Yeah, Connoisseur.
I love it.
It's not food cooked with pot. It's actually delicious food. And in between each course are pairings with different types of cannabis. Okay,
yes.
So it's a great thing. Like you'll get a sativa at first to sort of bring you up and engender lots of conversation. Sure. And towards the end of the meal, you get a more indica, so you can chill and relax. It's a beautiful, amazing experience. And then there's all sorts of tools, different vaporizers, incredible dab rigs. One is called the Vape Exhale. Even a grow box.
So all sorts of stuff, various ways for people to get involved, and we really hope that you guys out there will get involved.
No, and I really am. We're also really looking for great contributions.
Oh, right. You can actually participate in the creation of the book, or in future editions as well, because it's something that, if all goes well, you plan to re-release additional...
Updated, yeah.
Every year, yeah.
Yeah, because the world is expanding so quickly that it's almost impossible to keep pace with.
The second piece of news that I would like to talk about is actually very pertinent to the interview that we have on this episode. And it's in regards to a comment from our wonderful new Attorney General, Mr. Jeff Sessions.
Said with irony.
Yeah. So this came out April 5th. Of course, back in February, he launched his task force on crime reduction and public safety. And this was sort of the... flag in the air that cannabists and immigration people, everybody's pointing at this task force and they're just hand wringing and doom and gloom about how this is the return to the bad old days of the 80s and 90s when it comes to law enforcement. So on April 5th, there was a memo published from the Office of the Attorney General, and it was an update on this task force. And I want to quote the relevant piece of this. So I have it here, and it says, task force subcommittees will also undertake a review of existing policies in the area of charging, sentencing, and marijuana to ensure consistency with the department's overall strategy on reducing violent crime and with administration goals and priorities. So this was a 3-page memo. This is the only piece. It's 2 sentences long. It's the only piece that references marijuana. It was embedded in a paragraph that also talked about asset forfeiture, which is related, but it's a very, very different thing. And Other than that, it seems that the focus of this is on immigration. But the trigger of this memo is the doom and gloom stance of cannabis.
I am much more pessimistic than you. Let's put it on the table here.
Okay.
I think the fact that they hit it is an indication that they're not to be trusted. I think that immigration has always been tied with cannabis. Cannabis was prohibited originally in the 1930s because there were too many Mexicans crossing the border. They were very worried about this. I think it's deeply problematic that I think they could easily clamp down or bust a few people as a way of firing warning shots to say, get your act together, regulate, be really careful. I don't think Jeff Sessions is any fan of cannabis or marijuana. I'm not sure Donald Trump cares quite so much.
Yeah, I mean, do you really get the indication from this administration that they're gonna start gunning for the cannabis industry at all? It seems like they've got so much going on.
The history has, but it's an easy thing to target and it's an easy win. If you are against cannabis, it's an easy thing to bust. It smells a lot. It takes a lot of room up. It's easy to catch. It makes you look like law and order. This is exactly what Richard Nixon did.
But doesn't it
in the 1960s and 70s? And it was it's what Ronald Reagan did when he started spraying paraquat over fields in California.
Sure, but these guys were very much anti-drug, war on drugs, anti-drugs, drugs are bad, just say no. Like, that was part of the narrative.
Dude.
And it doesn't seem so far that this is part of the narrative.
They're really into the cops. The police supported Trump. The cops really hate cannabis. They just really do. They think it's a bad, evil thing, just like Jeff Sessions does. So unleash the cops, give them full warrant to go in and bust people, and they're happy.
So in your opinion, then, this is a situation of no news is in fact bad news, that they might be already working behind closed doors to get things to happen, and that the idea of this memo being interpreted as medical marijuana, legal marijuana, recreational marijuana being a low priority is just me looking for a happy pipe dream?
I say that with law and order and sort of authoritarian type of administrations, like what we might be seeing very soon, it's very important to keep your eyes open and to not be fooled by vague optimism. I think we have to listen to what they say and watch what they do extremely carefully and be ready to resist. I'm very cautious about these guys. I don't really trust them. I don't see the evidence to trust them.
Well, I think that there's someone else that we were fortunate enough to sit down and talk to that also had a lot to say about this matter. So I think that leads us to our interview. Let's talk to Mr. Ethan Nadelmann.
Let's get to Ethan. Back in the early 1990s, Ethan Nadelmann launched the Drug Policy Alliance, which was dedicated to shutting down the misguided and incredibly expensive and stupidly ineffective war on drugs. Together with George Soros, who was his main benefactor, Ethan was the man who got the country's first medical marijuana ballot initiative passed in California. That was a time when no one even understood what medical marijuana was or why it worked. People all over the country were deriding it as Cheech and Chong medicine. They ridiculed it as being a figment of the imagination of people who'd been smoking way too much for way too long. Matthew and I met with Ethan in his Midtown New York office in March. I was really hoping he'd pull out his crystal ball and tell us what the future of legalization and the end of prohibition might look like.
The important thing is, if you look at the whole Trump and drug war, right? The big issue of the drug war is the lens. The master narrative is, the wall. It's bad immigrants. It's
law and order.
Foreign cartels. Law and order. Violent, read black, right? And let's keep the police happy because those guys came out for me, and I love those guys in blue, right? And that's the master narrative,
yep.
and it's the Bannon Trump narrative, right?
It's not that dissimilar from the Nixon narrative, by the way, right?
No, that's right.
We've been here before.
It's the modern version of it, and equally, but in some respects, almost more insidious because he's really he's. Now, the interesting thing about it is that marijuana does not really fit within that narrative. There's not much evidence that Bannon cares about marijuana, right?
Trying to find out about that, yeah.
I haven't seen him. I was looking. I haven't seen him saying much of anything about it. And when I scroll through force myself to put the Breitbart app on my phone just to see what those guys are saying. And I don't see much on marijuana. You know, they're nailing Black Lives Matter every day. But Sessions is the ideologue, and not just, you know, I've turned him a drug war dinosaur, and that's kind of got picked up. But he's also the reefer madness ideologue, right?
Yes.
Now, Trump is not a reefer madness ideologue, and Trump has specifically said, when Bill Riley said to him, "Isn't the whole medical marijuana thing a sham?" And Trump goes, "No, I know people it's really helped." And Trump has been very clear. Spicer reiterated that in a press conference in late February. Ben Carson, who's much fairly a retrograde across the board, he also acknowledges the medical value of marijuana, right? But Sessions, there's a lot of insidious stuff that Jeff Sessions can do.
Let's talk about that.
Can we talk about this? Can
yes.
Can I read a quote?
Yes, please.
Is that from today?
Here's a quote. This is from earlier today. "I realize this may be an unfashionable belief in a time of growing tolerance toward drug use, but too many lives are at stake to worry about being fashionable. I reject the idea that America will be a better place if marijuana is sold in every corner store, and I am astonished to hear people suggest that we can solve our heroin crisis by legalizing marijuana, so people can trade one life-wrecking dependency for another that's only slightly less awful."
That was Jeff Sessions?
That was
This morning.
Jeff Sessions
This morning.
earlier today.
This morning, in announcing the Justice Department's new attack on violent crime. And if you look at I've looked at all Sessions' comments on this issue, and he is doing everything he can. Look, first of all, Donald Trump pushed the theme of violent crime to the absurdity level. And Sessions rolled back some of the lies that Trump has been saying about violence levels. But at every chance he has, he tries to link marijuana to it. He brought out a week or two ago, marijuana and violence, without, missing the obvious point that the only reason you have marijuana and violence is where marijuana is prohibited, right? That's what's resulting in this. So I mean, he's intellectually dishonest, and he's presumably smart enough to know better. And the quote that Matthew just read, I mean, somebody pointed out to him that there's a half a dozen solid studies, not by advocates, by scientists, by researchers, all providing really interesting circumstantial evidence that where marijuana is more readily available, typically in the medical marijuana states, you see declines or lower rates of overdose fatalities involving opioids, lower rates of pharmaceutical prescribing, and a whole host of other good outcomes. And so the first time he heard this, he mocked it as if nobody who would ever make such a thing up. And now this morning, his comment is, people are saying, "Oh, that's going to solve the opioid problem." Nobody's saying it's going to solve the opioid problem. What people are pointing out is there's really interesting evidence by objective researchers saying, you got easier access to marijuana, you got reduced pharmaceutical opioid problems, and maybe other illicit opioid problems, right?
Yeah, the same article that I lifted the quote from goes on to quote research from drugabuse.gov, which, quote, reports show reductions of 16 to 31% in mortality due to prescription opioid overdoses and 28 to 35% in admissions for treatment of opioid addiction in states where marijuana
it is an
legal.
incontrovertible fact.
I mean, look, you can imagine. They're already putting together the little meetings of their smarter players in the Justice Department, basically saying, how can we screw with these guys? How can we throw a wrench in the works, right? You know they're going to be appointing U.S. attorneys, and a lot of those U.S. attorneys are going to be assholes, and going to be people who basically want to screw with illegal marijuana stuff, right?
Isn't it a problem for Trump, though? Isn't it a Rorschach test for this guy? I mean, here he is, states' rights, entrepreneurship. Here's an industry that's earning gazillions of dollars, even in its infancy, right? How's he going to stop that? And how's he going to sort of prosecute?
I don't think he can stop it. I mean, I don't think he has any enthusiasm for the war on marijuana, right? I mean, his comments during the campaign, I don't really like Colorado, but he kind of gets it, and but let's leave it to the states. But he doesn't really care about states' rights. And most people don't really care about states' rights. It's kind of an argument that conservatives, or for that matter, liberals use when you want to advance. We use it to advance drug policy reform.
Yeah.
If the federal government's bad, you talk about states' rights. If the states are bad, you talk about federal supremacy, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's kind of the name of the game. There is a tradition of the states as laboratories of policy innovation, and everybody can sort of get around that, so long as as a liberal, so long as they're not screwing over people who are already disempowered in the political system. Now, on the marijuana thing, I think for the states' rights thing is an issue. But nobody's going to put them lie on the rails to block this thing if Sessions is going after it. I think I'll tell you, Joe. A week after
Tell me what you think. Go on, tell me.
The election, I fly out to Las Vegas for the marijuana industry conference here. And this is the big one.
I was there.
You were there, the marijuana industry, right? There's 11,000 people there. They closed the doors, shut registration. This is the same conference that has the World Poker Tournament, and they got more people in the World Poker Tournament, right? More than double what they had the previous year. I've been at one, right? And I got to tell you, so there's a plenary session about what comes next with me and Rob Campia from Marijuana Policy Project and Tick Segerblum, the chair of the Judiciary Committee in Nevada, and Dale Sky Jones, the activist
from
in
Amsterdam,
California,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm asked by the moderator, so what's going to happen? And I tell these guys, this is the day before he nominated Trump nominated Sessions. I said, look, it's not going to be a full frontal assault here, right? It's not going to be that. Well, but I said, you remember when Ashcroft went after Tommy Chong, right in the middle of the night for having those bongs where they weren't enforcing the law, and instead of sending Tommy Chong a little cease and desist letter, they basically show up in the middle of the night and put him in jail and all this. I said they're going to pick out some big targets, right? They're going to do some interesting litigation. They're going to maybe try to screw with the ability of states to legally regulate these legal marijuana markets, which is not fully settled law. Right?
Clearly, yeah.
They will use asset forfeitures where you don't have to prove guilt in a court of law. They will identify local allies in local sheriffs, local police, local DAs who don't like this stuff either, right? They'll pick out a few juicy targets in order to make a lesson, right? I mean, you saw right after Sessions' comments and Spicer's comments, the publicly traded stocks in marijuana dropped 10 or 15%, right?
Yeah.
And so I think and what's going to happen is that in the last few years, if we've seen more of the more legitimate types, the Wall Street types and others beginning to want to invest, I think them are going to say, give this a few more years, let this thing quiet down. Now, mind you, this is an industry that grew up under people named, Bush, or under Clinton and Bush, and a hostile first few years of the Obama administration. So they're used to dealing with adversity. They're used to dealing with risk.
Good point.
Some of the less risk-averse players,
they'll go bye-bye?
No, the more risk-averse ones will go bye-bye. The ones who are in the early days may feel like a little sigh of relief that we're used to taking on the government, but at least we don't have to take on the savvy money guys now. So this stuff's going to keep moving forward. I think, check out, California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada. I think they're going to move forward. They got strong state support there. You already see Governor Inslee and the Attorney General, I forget his name now, in Washington, the Oregon Governor, Kate Brown. You got, they're all saying, we're doing stuff here. And while we're doing sanctuary vis-a-vis immigrants and other things, we're going to do stuff on marijuana too. On the other hand, in Maine, where you got that nutcase, reactionary governor, LePage, right? He's now a big fan of the marijuana legalization law. So he might be willing to,
play ball with the Trumps?
Yeah, and maybe he doesn't want to have it on his name on it. But if Sessions is willing to do something nasty and LePage has got to get out of the way, so we'll see. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
You think they're going to say, okay to medical, but no more recreational?
Well,
Can they even do that?
Trump Spicer basically said that's the name of the game now. And Spicer specifically referenced this Rohrabacher Farr Amendment, the one that Congress has renewed 2 or 3 years running, which says that the Justice Department cannot spend a penny to go after medical marijuana in any of the states that have legalized it. And Spicer made a point of saying that's one of the reasons we're not, that amendment's got to be reauthorized every year. If that does not get reauthorized this year, that can create a problem because then Sessions can drive through that. On the other hand, there's another amendment that almost passed 2 years ago, the McClintock, or a Republican in California, I think. That amendment narrowly failed, 220 to 206 a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And that would have prohibited the Justice Department from going after not just medical, but all marijuana in legal states. And so I did this piece in the Times a few weeks ago, and not bad. And one of the things I said was, the Congress better renew the Rohrabacher Amendment vis-a-vis medical, but they better get this other one through too, because that will be the best way to really, put a wrench in the works for Sessions.
Well, but even this morning, as Sessions was making his comments when he was pressed by members of the media, it said that the he believed that big portions of the Cole memorandum were valid, and that were valid.
Yeah,
the Cole memo. And said that it's not going to be the Justice Department to go in and pick up the work that state and local police are deciding to put down.
Right. Well, look. So it's the fact is that Cole memorandum. If you choose, a lot of it is how do you interpret the Cole memorandum, And, with Holder and Lynch, the Cole Memorandum was good guidelines, good faith. You could take that same words in the Cole Memorandum and have a very strict interpretation, and all of a sudden it looks a lot differently. The other thing is there was a piece in Politico a few weeks ago where both Rand Paul, the Libertarian Republican senator from Kentucky, and Cory Gardner, the Republican senator from Colorado, both said that Sessions had assured them that he wasn't looking to change anything big time. But who knows?
Who knows?
Exactly.
So how are these guys? They're not beholden to anything.
No, that's right. And they're not known for telling the truth.
And they can move in, as you said, in small ways.
And the fact is, under U.S. law, a U.S. attorney has the right to enforce federal law as he sees fit. When an attorney general, although they can tell the U.S. attorneys around the country what their priorities are, they cannot tell them not to enforce federal law, right? In fact, Bush got in trouble at one point for, I think, telling some U.S. attorneys not to enforce federal law. When Holder, they said this is not a priority, right? But they cannot tell a U.S. attorney, do not enforce that federal law. So Sessions can meanly appoint a lot of U.S. attorneys who are gung-ho to go after this marijuana thing, who are gung-ho to enforce federal law, and he can basically sit back while the U.S. attorneys do their thing, and then he, as Attorney General, just says, hey, under federal law, I cannot tell a U.S. attorney not to do his job.
Okay, so here's my question. I was at the same marijuana conference you were at. I was at the Privateer, ArcView, which is the venture capitalist gathering, right? These guys were giddy right after the election, not because Trump won, but because 9 states voted further for marijuana legalization, right? Some program. So they were counting up, there's 29 states. This is too many voters to contravene. We cannot go against this many voters. That's what they were claiming and saying. I wasn't at all convinced, okay?
I gotta tell you,
go on.
There's a lot of wishful thinking. I mean,
the smell of money is very intoxicating.
Was that the Cassandra at the festival here? I mean, I'm basically the one saying, guys, I know you're all happy and giddy, but open up your eyes. Look who Trump is going to be. You all. I hear some of you saying that Trump's going to be too busy. Sessions is going to be too busy picking on immigrants and going after violent crime and all this sort of stuff. It's not about being too busy. It's who you appoint. It's the messages you send. So I said, if you think this is going to be an easier, I said, batten down the hatches right now. And these guys didn't want to hear this.
They don't want to hear it.
They said, I did another event besides that one, Joe, at some Wall Street gathering last month, with Wall Street investors. And I'm basically saying, look, he can't shut this thing down. But this is going to, you got to be a little careful here. There's too many of you to go after, and the state authorities are going to be stepping up. And by the way, some of the leaders in the industry are finally beginning to step up. I was always a little frustrated with them because they kind of rely on the do-gooders like me to win these legalization initiatives. And they would say, well, if they're going to do it we don't have to give them anything, they'll do it. Hell, they're delivering us wonderful opportunities to make money. So what do you have? Now they understand that, their ass is on the line.
Glad to hear it, man. Because I've been asking people for months, okay, who's leading the lobbying effort here? And I can't seem to get an answer.
Well,
can you?
Yeah, there is. It looks like a coalition is coming together. With a very talented guy who I know very well.
Name?
I don't know if I'm free to say his name now, but what he and a few others are doing is to putting together basically a number of the leaders in the industry to put together the funding, to hire the lobbyists, to fund, hopefully, my organization and some others working on this thing. So there's going to be a more coordinated effort. And remember also, this is an industry where a lot of these people are Republicans, and quite a number of them voted for Trump. And there's a lot of Republicans and Republicans who are well connected politically, who are invested in this industry now.
I know.
So the fact that it's happening now means that they would be landing up, taking on an industry where
they have some
a lot
support.
Of their friends.
No, they have some support. I know.
Why? What is the motivation on the Trump administration, on Sessions and the Department of Defense, or Justice?
I don't think Trump really cares. I think he's just trying to balance a bunch of his constituents on this. I think Bannon probably doesn't care much, although I don't know for sure. Right?
I just heard that Drudge, he doesn't care either. He hasn't written
Drudge doesn't
much.
care.
No.
A lot of the Republicans are in the do not care. But Sessions is a throwback to another era. Sessions is like, if you had to dig out one of the most reefer madness guys in Congress, it would be Jeff Sessions. If you have to talk about a guy who, was looking to associate marijuana with heroin and marijuana with violence, It's Jeff Sessions.
This is Jeff
a guy,
Beauregard Sessions, by the way, okay?
And this is a man who, where various strands of racism run throughout this guy's history, where there's a heartlessness. I mean, once in a while, he does a little something to show a tiny bit of humanity. So he'll point to the couple of things he did on principle, or the fact that he helped with some sentencing reform, back, in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, 90% of what this guy does is fairly evil, but he perceives himself as a moral force. He perceives himself as doing the right thing.
He's a crusader.
He's a crusader. And, most of these guys have died out or have faded. And even the Republican Party, I think the more pragmatic folks were getting the upper hand on the marijuana stuff. But we're talking about somebody here from Alabama. Remember, Alabama is one of those places where if you were, gotten arrested and convicted of marijuana possession 2 or 3 times, you could land up spending more than 10 years in a state penitentiary.
For possession.
Of a small, and you can guess what color the people were who were, doing that. So Sessions remember, he was a real outlier among the Republicans. Well-liked, a congenial, Southern congeniality guy. So people, I think if he'd been known as more of an asshole, among his colleagues, he might not have gotten through. But his congeniality helped to cover up the real venality of his politics.
So a lot of people will say to me, Joe, why are you invested in like the right for people to get high? And I have to say to them, it's really not about the right to get high, dude. It's about all sorts of other things, about criminal justice and equality and racism. How do you talk about that? What do you say?
Well, I mean, normally what I do, Joe, is I lead into it. I open up with the arguments about the ineffectiveness of marijuana prohibition, the costliness of marijuana prohibition.
What's it cost last year?
Billions and billions, right?
Gazillions.
And then the negative consequences of prohibition, right? From empowerment of criminal organizations and people being killed and drug deals gone bad and this unregulated market and people who need medical quality marijuana not being able to know how this stuff was growing and all the 750,000 arrests each year and the racial disproportionality. So I go through all of the arguments about the negative, about the ineffectiveness, the cost and the consequences. And then I close with the moral argument. And the moral argument I don't frame as my right to get high.
Yeah.
I frame it as my right not to be punished for what I put in my body if I don't hurt anybody else, right? Yeah. That I, as a human being, and especially an adult human being, what I put in my own body is my own business. It's not the government's, it's not the employer's, so long as I'm not driving stoned or showing up at work stoned or something like that. And I think that's the core moral thing. And quite frankly, that principle applies not just to marijuana, but really to the whole range of other drugs, right?
Definitely.
In the same way that free speech applies not just to the good speech, but the bad and the ugly speech, and the same thing with press and even religion. Well, when it comes to our right of sovereignty of our own minds and bodies, it applies equally to marijuana and psychedelics as it does to cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine.
Here.
That doesn't mean that you have it all being sold over the counter. It means the government has to use judgment in how it allows these things to be produced and sold. But when it comes to the ultimate consumer, I think there it's a basic human right.
Earlier this year in 2017, Ethan announced that he was stepping down from the Drug Policy Alliance, and the activist world started shaking. Some people thought he was really sick. Others said he just couldn't face 4 years of Trump. Well, guess what? They were all wrong. So you're stepping down from DPA next month, April? This month, April?
End of April, yeah.
Why are you leaving?
I'll tell you, Joe, it was a combination of the personal, the organizational, and the political. That in all 3 areas, it was the best or the least bad time to go. From a personal one, over a year and a half ago, it's like you start doing the 17th budget for the organization and the 34th board meeting and the 9th biennial conference, and you start to notice that fatigue and, from the organizational, I wanted to do it when the organization we're in a very strong place now financially in terms of a lot of my staff have been here a long time. So in that sense, it was a good moment. George Soros made a 10-year commitment to the organization 5 years ago, and he's now a little less than a third of our funding, but he's the biggest donor. And then politically, on the marijuana issue, it was kind of like from California 96 with medical marijuana, to California 2016 with legalization, that was there was a certain closure there and a sense of accomplishment and what that California initiative is and public opinion in the sense that we're past the tipping point, notwithstanding Sessions, on this stuff. And so that, and even on the other issue, I mean, I look at some of the younger people working for me now, fresh out of college. I mean, for me, the monumental achievement was playing a key role in moving the country from 25% to 58%, and from 0 states legal to 28 legal medical and 8 legal recreational. For the young people, they grew up with marijuana being legal for medical. Yeah. They were in college when it was being legalized more broadly. For them, it's not, are we going to win it? The question is, when we win it, who's going to get the bennies? And is it going to be racially and socially just, which are issues I care about passionately, but not with the same passion the other ones. And then you look outside the marijuana area, on the whole war on drugs, nobody buys into the war on, except Jeff Sessions, but I mean, almost nobody buys into the war on drugs. We've moved the needle on that one. We've moved the needle on the public health and overdose and needle exchange and all that stuff as well. And I've been talking for decades that this is a 3-generation movement, and we're now well into the 2nd generation, of this thing. And I guess the last thing was, I don't know anybody who thought it was time for me to step aside. I wanted to be the first one to think it was time for me to step aside.
It does.
It's always a good way to go, isn't it?
It does kind of fit a perfect narrative arc. Like, we can see the credits rolling on the screen, but we have the scene where the new villain in the form of Sessions is arriving to set off the sequel for this, and now it's time to pass the torch. I think it's great.
I mean, it did give me when because I had I started thinking about this a year and a half in the spring summer of 2015. I kind of made up my mind by the summer of 2016, set the wheels in motion. I had to rethink for a moment when Trump won. But then I just decided with the few people I was discussing this with that, my mind was made up. It was time. And the other thing is I'm still young enough to do some other stuff. I mean, I just turned 60 on Monday,
Well, happy birthday.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so, it's like I feel good. I'm looking forward to adventures ahead. No idea what I'm going to do, but we'll see.
That's good. But so I want to ask you for the successors, okay? It seems to me that you got to be really patient to do what you've done for the last X number of years. You got to really take a lot of pleasure in small micro wins. Is that correct?
Well,
how do you keep going? How do you sustain the momentum over a long haul like this?
I think the single most important thing is a strong sense of righteous injustice, that this war on drugs is a fundamentally venal thing in our society. It is a massive violation of human rights in this country and throughout much of the world. It makes no sense. It is intellectually abhorrent. It is morally abhorrent. It is abhorrent from a racial justice perspective, a social,
even financially, right? It just makes no sense
in every regard. And so that passion just has kept bubbling out of me and continues. That has not relented. I think, secondly, in understanding the nature of political change, part of what it means to be involved in drug policy reform is to have a grand vision, and it's a vision where the role of the criminal justice system and the criminal law and drug policy is minimized as much as possible and grounded not in ignorance, fear, prejudice, and profit, but in science, compassion, health, and human rights. So you're driven by a vision, and then it's about designing and implementing the incremental reforms toward that vision, making sure that you're not falling into traps, that you're not taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. It means getting involved in the trenches of legislative warfare and litigative warfare to do that, but being driven by this vision that can inspire people and give you something to aim for. So that's a big part of it. Another part of it is, working with fantastic people. I mean, the thing I'm going to miss is I love the people I work with, especially in the organization, but throughout the movement. This is, one thing about the early stage of most social justice movements is when the Menschkeit ratio is very high. There's relatively, you get some nutty, wacko activists, but you don't get that many assholes early on, right? I mean, it's people coming to this for the right reason. It means a lot of good people. And building this organization, my rule has been that both for my board and for my staff, basically I try to have a policy where nobody gets to work here or be on the board unless they're a mensch. And sometimes you make a mistake, but we try not to keep them around if we did. So that's a bit the people you work with, and then of course the wins. The fact that this is a movement which, if I look where we were, I got started in the heyday of the drug war. And now we've made transformative progress on marijuana issue, and and we've made real progress in other areas.
You had mentioned in your time, one of the things that kept you going was counting the wins. And I wanted to ask you, you are going to hand this off. Someone is going to come along and take up the reins on this. If you could look out from where we are right now and sort of target them toward 3 wins, what are 3 things that are ripe to pick off the vine as wins for drug policy change in this country?
Little ones, little incremental ones, or big ones?
Things that we think we could get, things that we can move forward.
The thing I started with, to ask you, that little bill in Congress, that McClintock bill, which would prohibit the Justice Department from going after marijuana in the states that have legalized it, that would mean a lot right now in this environment, and with Sessions looking to do what he can do. So I think that would be a really important one. I think, secondly, I think on the marijuana, this is all on the marijuana front. I think that winning a few states, I think we need one of these states to move forward with legalization legislatively, whether it's in New England. I got, DPA, my organization, we're focused right now in New York, New Jersey, New Mexico, right? And we think there's a chance New Jersey, the guy who's going to succeed, the most likely successor to Governor Christie, could well be, who's already out there for legalizing marijuana. I forget his name, but he's the guy, the one who's seen as having the best chance right now. And I think even his principal competitor is out for legalization, and it's a Democratic legislature. And my Roseanne Scotti, who's run my New Jersey office for 15 years, is like, when she puts her mind to something, the one thing you know is it's going to happen. Great. You're not sure when, but it's going to happen. I got Dynamite director in New Mexico, Emily Kaltenbach. She's got a plan whereby they get the legislature to put the initiative on the ballot, because in New Mexico you can't do a citizen initiative. Got to be that. And New York, I mean, Cuomo's a pain in the ass on this stuff, but we're doing the groundwork here, and it's a place where the racial justice piece is going to be much more prominent. So I think getting it through legislatively, and then hopefully winning Michigan. We're working with Marijuana Policy Project there, and they're going to take the lead on the campaign, the fundraising, and helping them draft it. So I think those would be some significant victories on the marijuana front. The other things, the other work we do, I'm looking forward to a few cities beginning to open up safe injection facilities so people don't have to shoot up on the streets and they don't have to die of an overdose. And Seattle looks like they may be first out of the gate. Maybe Ithaca will be, maybe New York, maybe San Francisco. We got a meeting planned that I just got money for allowing pharmaceutical heroin to be prescribed to drug addicts the way that they do in Europe now. So I feel we're breaking through on that front. I think a lot of cops are supporting a program called LEAD, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, where instead of giving people a criminal record or arresting them when you pick them up with drugs, you send them directly to some facility to get some help without leaning all over them.
Sure, so just a big deal in Houston, Texas with this.
So some good things happening there. And then I'll tell you, I'm bummed about Latin America, where we had some real momentum a few years ago, but medical marijuana has taken off big time throughout Latin America. I'm impressed by that. And meanwhile, Europe, which was seeming so self-satisfied by being so much in advance on drug policy, where I would go and study what they were doing on marijuana and heroin and harm reduction. Now you see in Switzerland, and you see in the Netherlands, and you see in Denmark, and you see a lot of places, you see sentiment for really Spain, a little bit in England, you see sentiment for moving forward on
Czech Republic, Germany.
Yep, on marijuana legalization. Germans just did medical.
So did South Africa.
Right?
So did Australia.
Switzerland's got a bunch of little cities moving forward on this stuff.
I was talking to somebody in Israel today, and they told me that 8 kibbutzim are moving from planting and growing grapefruits to cannabis.
Is that right?
Come on. Doesn't that make so much sense?
Yeah.
You want to make money as a kibbutz? Is it grapefruits or is it cannabis?
All I remember is they used to have only 8 licensed grow sites, right? One was kosher, one was organic, right? And now you have the same thing in the U.S. So those are the incremental steps, I think. I think the longer term, the number one mission of Drug Policy Alliance going forward, almost certainly, because I think even when I leave, it's sort of woven into the DNA and the consciousness of staff and board, is going to be ending the criminalization of drug use and possession of all drugs. It's going to be the Portugal model, the more European model, where nobody goes to jail or loses their freedom simply for drug use or possession, right? And then we can work from there about, well, once you accept that, how do they get it from a legal source? But I think that's going to be that's not going to necessarily be ballot initiatives, but we'll see.
Not going to be under a non-compassionate federal government either.
No.
Right, not
at all.
Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you so much.
He said he was going to write his book and then think about what he was going to do with the rest of his life. Personally, I think he should finish that book fast and then run for higher office. No pun intended.
So it's been nearly a month since we recorded the interview with Ethan, and although the grumbling continues about drugs and drug policy in Washington, nothing really firm has come to the plate yet. The White House hosted a roundtable discussion on drug policy where they invited in members of the public, but really that focused on opioid addiction. And the times when marijuana was even brought up, there was only one moment, and it seemed like it was forced into place. So with what we talked about before in the news section and the violent crime task force and this whole sort of deprioritization, not really talking about it, but maybe working behind the scenes. Joe, the question that I put to you is, are we at a new beachhead for the legalization movement, or is this moment really just the calm before the storm?
So the optimistic way of looking at that is, in the last election, both red and blue America, the only thing they agreed on was legalization or medical marijuana programs.
Absolutely.
The only thing they agreed on. That's the positive view. I'm a little darker than that today. I think in the past, whenever a law and order administration has come into office, the first thing they do is start a war and then start cracking down. And the easiest thing to crack down on is pot because it's big and it has a really strong smell. Mm-hmm. It's really easy to catch.
Low-hanging fruit.
I think we can only keep our eyes open here and listen to what they say very carefully and really plan for the worst.
How do we go about planning for the worst? They're not saying anything. I think that's the point, is that they're not saying anything. I wonder about like I said, this sort of doom and gloom, and it's this perspective of everybody's like, oh man, Jeff Sessions is just going to ruin everything. All the progress we made is going to get undone. But I'm wondering if there's just so much fear that people are looking past the real opportunity right now. I mean, he's commissioned a group to study marijuana. Is this the path to getting marijuana moved to a different scheduling and them to really crack down on the opioid problem, which is really where they should be focusing?
The problem with scheduling, it's a really complicated issue. We should do a whole other podcast about that.
I think we should.
Moving it to Schedule 2 or 3 means basically you're going to go to Walgreens to buy your legal weed. And I don't want to do that, and I don't think anybody does. That sounds like a no fun I think these guys are no fun.
They're no fun.
Okay?
They are very clearly no fun.
I think they're no fun, and I think we have to really be very careful when there's no fun in the world.
Thanks for listening to the Brave New Weed podcast. This episode and all future episodes are made possible by amazing listeners like yourself. If you like what you've heard, we encourage you to show your support by giving $1 a month for special access and rewards on patreon.com/bravenewweed. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram via @bravenewweed. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/bravenewweed. And remember, you can always find more information about us or information discussed in each episode by pointing your favorite browser to bravenewweed.com.
Yeah, listen, and I hope that anybody who's listening will think to support the Drug Policy Alliance. Go to drugpolicy.org. You can sign up for our emails, and please, please, please make a contribution, no matter how small. It would help enormously. You want to know how to get active? Contact us, and we'll connect you with whoever's working locally, wherever you live. Because you know what they say? Think global, act local, and all politics is ultimately local. So that's where the action is.